Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It's Monday, March 11th, and I'm doing a little catch up after returning from India. I was there around the end of February into first part of March here, and I've just returned. And of course, I missed some of the action while I was gone. Particularly, people have been emailing me saying, "Are you going to do something on the entrance of Uranus into Taurus?" So you may have missed this. If you follow my YouTube channel, you may not know this, but I do written horoscopes throughout the week as well. So written updates or forecasts. So you can always check nightlightastrology.com. And if you're like, hey, I haven't seen a video posted from Adam in a while, and I'd like to know what's going on, you can always go to my website because in all likelihood, I've posted something in written form. These are also usually posted in audio form on SoundCloud as well. And I'll usually post that link on my website so that you can get there too. I also post all of my written content on Facebook. You can friend me on Facebook. It's there. So that's just a note because I had some people also confused as to where to connect with my written content. So at any rate, we're going to talk about Uranus's entrance into Taurus today. This is exciting for me. I'm a Taurus rising, so it's coming into my first house, right? So I've been in the 12th house for a long time. Kind of exciting to have it bump into the whole sign first. There's a lot of different things we can say about this transit. I've already done a 3-part series on Uranus into Taurus. If you look back in my archives, you'll find a 3-part series that's pretty comprehensive. So I would recommend getting into that if you want a real deep, thorough treatment. But this is a different take, some different insights that I'm bringing to this video that aren't in any of those 3. And the reason for that is that Uranus entered Taurus last May. And so we had a brief preview of Uranus and Taurus, which I did a few videos on. And then Uranus backed out into late Aries again between like November and March. And now that it's coming back in, worth doing one more video and give you some new things to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up on the screen as usual. And let's just point it out so that you can see it first of all. So here's the planet Uranus. If you don't know the glyph of Uranus, it's good to get to know all the planetary glyphs, easier to recognize. And you'll see that Uranus has just entered the sign of Taurus at 0 degrees, 14 minutes. Every degree, there's 30 degrees per sign, 60 minutes. So sexagesimal form of division that we use, like a clock. 60 minutes, 60 seconds per minute, like that. These aren't literal minutes, but so it's moved into the first degree, 0 degree of Taurus, where it will now stay all the way into 2026. There are a number of reasons why the entrance of an outer planet like Uranus into a new sign is significant. Oops, let's go over here. So mainly because it's somewhat rare for an outer planet to change signs because they take a long time to go through each of the 12 signs. So for example, Uranus typically takes about 7 years to go through every sign of the zodiac, and you have an 84-year cycle, which means we're not going to see Uranus coming back into Taurus in our lifetimes. If you were just born or really very young, then maybe, but not for most of us. So it's rare when it changes signs. It makes quite a splash when it enters a new sign. In whole sign houses, this is because it's also entering a new house, which means new topics in your birth chart will typically be activated. So you want to check the whole sign house of Taurus in your birth chart to get more insight. But I want to talk today less about how to interpret Uranus in your birth chart, which I covered again in the 3-part series that I did if you dig back in my archives. Instead, I want to talk about some of the insights that I had about Uranus in Taurus while I was in India. There's kind of a story that I have that I shared in a written post already. I'm going to kind of reshare it today in this video blog. First of all, in modern astrology, Uranus is often compared to the figure of Prometheus. If you don't know Prometheus, a long story short is that Prometheus is this titan who, if I remember correctly, who steals the fire from the gods, thinking that humanity should have the fire. So he steals the fire. It's kind of technology you could say, and he wants to bring it back down. He hides it inside of a fennel stalk, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he is caught, and for his hubris, his pride, his arrogance, wanting to be on the same level of the gods, he's punished. Still getting over a cold I picked up on my way home from India. He's punished, and he's sort of tied to the side of a cliff, and it's pretty brutal. There's kind of a bird that rips out his entrails, and then he's sewed back up, and he has to go through it all over again the next day. So this is a serious transgression, the desire to be on the same level of the gods, to desire to be immortal, the desire to take something from the heavens. And yet this is a core part of the symbolism of the planet Uranus that many modern astrologers, archetypal astrologers, have associated with the planet for a long time now. Maybe chief among them is both Liz Green and Richard Tarnas. Richard Tarnas wrote a book called Prometheus the Awakener, if I remember correctly, the title of it. My memory's a little fuzzy today. And that book is fantastic for any of you who want a deeper read on the planet Uranus, archetypal sort of mythological symbolism, and connection to the figure of Prometheus. But at any rate, Prometheus is a complicated character. A lot of the times in this day and age, we sort of celebrate Prometheus for being kind of like a rebel, the fire thief, and the progressive idealist in Prometheus is attractive to a lot of us. We live in a day and age where progress is an obsession for just about everybody, as is the desire to live forever, to be young, to not age, to not die, to be wealthy, to be popular. So these elements of wanting immortality, desiring it, coveting it selfishly, these are modern myths in a sense that go along. They're timeless, but they are particularly strong in this day and age, you might say, when so much of what the material wealth of the world right now provides people, at least in the West, is with the ability to, become your own avatar and try to create your own eternal script. So we're all trying to live forever. We're all trying to become our highest self. There's a lot of ascensional qualities in the way that we think about our lives these days. I'm going upward. I'm trying to get to my highest self. I'm trying to be the best that I can be, all of this. It's very Promethean in a sense, very Uranian. In fact, Uranus is discovered around the times of the French and American revolutions, which are all about, progress, very avant-garde quality. And Prometheus actually has some interesting similarities to Venus. And this is important because Uranus, associated with Prometheus, Uranus is going into Taurus's, into the sign of Taurus, which is the domicile of Venus. So what's the connection between Prometheus and Venus? Well, Venus is sometimes also referred to as, in her morning star position, as Lucifer. And the morning star, the bright morning star that rises before the sun, that comes up ahead of the sun, then eventually falls down. So the brightest star in heaven, but eventually falls. Prometheus is a similar figure. He's this elevated character, kind of a heroic character, who's considered, kind of a hero. But he has a transgression, he has a fall. Venus is morning star related to Lucifer, also the Lucifer / Satan in the sort of Christian, sort of biblical Christian, Judeo-Christian tradition. Lucifer / Satan is a promising, high, most glorious angel that aspires for the highest seat in heaven. And because of that aspiration, that hubris and that pride falls. So you have this bright star in the morning that comes up before the sun, which is sort of a symbol for the king or God or something like that. And this bright star aspiring for the highest place in heaven, but falls. And Prometheus is a similar figure, where there is a serious transgression related to the desire to be immortal or to have something that the gods have. So there's an interesting connection there that we should note, because Uranus, this Promethean planet, is entering Venus's sign. Now, the interesting thing is that just as Uranus was recently, I'll back up and show you this so you can actually have a look at this. So you're going to notice, if I go back just a little bit, when I was in India, I noticed this. You see how Venus, just before Uranus entered Taurus, Venus went into a square with Uranus. And then you'll see Venus enters Aquarius, and there it is. Uranus goes into Venus's sign of Taurus. So this entrance of Uranus into Taurus is toned by a square from Venus to Uranus. Now that's significant because it's sort of like a birth chart for the planet Uranus's entrance into a new sign. When you're looking at things that happen right as a planet is making a major transition that will tone an entire era, a number of years to come, the things that are happening right as that occur are like the things that we look at in a birth chart that have significance for the whole life of an individual. So this interesting dynamic between Uranus and Venus is like a hint for us as to what the upcoming period will entail. And this really dawned on me when I was in Mayapur in India, which is a pilgrimage site for people who are practitioners in Krishna Bhakti. So you'll notice that people in India, like pilgrims, who come from all over India, and people from all over the world that come to these holy places, are very eager to receive darshan of the deities, the deities in the temples. So it's like a big deal. It's like a pilgrimage, and people are often very poor and coming from long distance to see the deities. There was a ceremony on the day that Venus was squaring Uranus in Mayapur called the Maha-Abhishek. This is a very beautiful ceremony where they bathe the Panchatattva deities, which are like a fivefold expansion of Krishna through an avatar of Krishna called Lord Chaitanya, celebrated in Bengal in India. And so they bathe the deities. They're really tall. They have to get up on ladders, and they bathe them in like yogurt and ghee and milk and honey and Ganges water, and it's very, very beautiful ceremony. And it's very powerful because the deities, like in many shamanic traditions around the world, there's a lot of power and sort of Shakti imbued in the deities through the worship, the tradition, the sort of ancientness of the practices, and they're very, very powerful. And they're thought to be houses of the divine. They're thought of like, a Christian might think of the transubstantiation of the bread and the wine in communion. The deities become home of divinity. So at any rate, these ceremonies are very powerful. You can imagine these big, huge golden statues, right? They're just amazing. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. So I went to the ceremony, the Maha-Abhishek, and there were thousands and thousands of people trying to get into the temple. So it was pretty crazy. And there was just that kind of, like a rock concert, like just masses of people being smushed together like sardines, and just trying to push toward the altars to be able to see the deities, called darshan. So in that rush, right, I found myself you kind of, from a distance, you could kind of see the golden effulgence of the deities. It was very beautiful. And I found myself getting swept up in the desire to see the deities, to see the golden effulgence, to take it in, to be close to it, just like everyone else, all the pilgrims from everywhere. And getting caught in the kind of mob mentality and getting, swept up in it and trying to get closer and kind of, getting really desperate about it. And then several times, even though I was, trying to get closer, I'd kind of get swept out. It was like, if you've ever been in a rock concert or something, you're moving and all of a sudden waves of, movement will kind of push you and you're like, I'm going to fall over and I'm going to get trampled. And it's really scary. But I ended up getting pushed out of the crowd. And then I was there like from a distance, like, oh, I can't see the deities. It was really frustrating. And then basically what happened from there was, the same thing would occur several times. Basically occurred like several times in a row where I was really trying to get closer, trying to imbibe, you know what I mean? Imbibe this golden effulgence. But I couldn't because I kept getting pushed out and I started, the astrologer in me started thinking, Venus is squaring Uranus right now, like perfectly, like it's perfecting right now while this is happening. And I just kept getting swept up in the intense desire to like rush toward the golden light of these beautiful deities and then getting cast back and hurled aside. And I felt like a beggar because I was among many, many people who are, in just kind of an everyday sense, like night and day compared to what kind of wealth or privilege I have in my life compared to the people I were among, many of which were very poor pilgrims coming from all over India. So, and I was just crammed in it, but feeling the same way everyone else was, and then getting hurled back and cast out and feeling really dejected, like I can't get near that golden light, and then feeling like a beggar. Like I had this kind of almost like a third eye moment of feeling like I was seeing myself as a beggar. While I was sitting on the outside looking in, feeling kind of dejected and sorry for myself that I couldn't get closer, I remembered the words of one of the senior devotees on the trip who was speaking during a parikrama talk that we were doing these pilgrimages to holy sites every day. And he had said, we forget that darshan isn't about getting to see the Lord, getting to see God or see divinity. It's about presenting ourselves before the deity to be seen as humble servants, to ask for more facility to serve. So he was saying, almost like, think about it more like if you were in the palace of a great, king or leader, someone that you really loved, who was very admirable, and you wanted to get closer to that king or queen or whatever, not so much so that you could see them, like, oh, them, but so that you could present yourself and say, can I be your servant? Can I do something for you? Can I be close to you? Can you take me into your employment? Can I do, when we really love someone, in other words, we desire to serve. We desire to give. It's the difference if you go on a date with someone and, as a guy, right? I know this because anyway, in sort of heterosexual dynamics as a guy, I go out on a date with a girl when I'm like 18. And if it's very apparent that all I'm thinking about is like, when are we going to make out, or will you be my girlfriend, or, some kind of desire that I have that's really selfish. It became clear to me pretty early on that would turn, most girls off. So you had to learn, it's like chivalry, like had to learn sort of how to be, patient and how to be someone who is there to appreciate and to serve, to have that kind of attitude before someone that you like. Because you learn over time that when you love something, it's not about your own selfish interest. You really want to give. So I that voice of the teacher came into my mind talking about how darshan isn't really about getting to see the deities. It's about presenting ourselves humbly before them to be seen. And this really stuck in my mind because I caught myself getting swept up in the desire to get so close to them, right? I wanted them. You know what I mean? It was selfish. And so I sort of slowly ambled away from the crowd, and I found myself standing along a fence at the outskirts of the temple, and I could see just a small glimpse of the golden deities through the crowd in the distance. But I tried to make that adjustment of not being just groping and rushing toward the deities. And you have to understand that for many people again in India, the desire to see the deities, to get close to them, to rush toward them, is because there is a desire for a material benediction, understandably, because lots of people are totally impoverished, right, and suffering greatly. And yet, most of the scriptures tell us that the desire for some material benediction actually becomes an impediment to receiving the flow, the emanating flow of the divine that comes from these kinds of ceremonies. So this was something that, this is something that you would have heard, not just the teacher that I was around, but teachers throughout the entire tradition that were holding this ceremony, that this kind of attitude of like rushing and pushing and kicking and elbowing and just groping toward the golden light of the day, like this is not what it's about. So anyway, I was feeling like I had gotten swept up in that, and I realized that I needed to make an inner adjustment, right? But I had this thought, wow, this is Venus square to Uranus. This is that Promethean urge, right? This is that Luciferic, the desire for the golden effulgence, I want the halo around my head. I want the blessing. I want the golden thing. So I appreciated the piety of everyone there, because I would rather be amongst people who were hungry to be near religious ceremony than I would be around people who are, lusting to run toward the shopping mall. Do you know what I mean? So I don't mean to speak down to anybody, because I think that the piety was admirable. And I heard someone else say that as well. And it helped me to see that, to learn how to see where that's coming from. It's not all bad. But I had at least confused the desire to consume the effulgence of the divine, to merge with it or rush toward it, and also to grab photos of it and to put it on Instagram or whatever, with the desire to present myself as a servant before the deities. So this was a really important lesson, and you can see this in everyday life. Right. When I scroll through Instagram on a regular basis, and I don't mean to put down anyone. I'd rather see people doing yoga postures than, consuming endlessly and mindlessly. Right. But you'll sometimes see as well that there is a desire to present oneself as spiritual or yogic alongside of that kind of golden, sort of lusty golden effulgence. Look at how beautiful and sexy I am doing my yoga pose. Look at how accomplished I am. Look at how wise and centered I am. Look at how serene the environment is that I'm in while doing something spiritual. Look at how clean and centered my vegan dish looks, or you know what I mean? So these kinds of things within myself, I became more aware of in this moment as Venus was squaring Uranus, and I'm sitting on the outskirts, having caught myself just trying to bull rush, the deities. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, we're taught that it's desirable to elevate our lives and our consciousness to the mode of goodness. So, eating a vegan dish, or doing yoga, or trying to find centeredness, or being at religious festivals or ceremonies, or that kind of ethical, beautiful, good, tidy, noble, intelligent, virtuous. These are called sattvic. They're the mode of goodness. We're taught in the Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures that we want to elevate our lives to that level or to that platform, but we're also told that it's not the final game. It's not the end point. The desire to do good, the desire to consume the good, to be a good person, to be clean, to be beautiful, to be noble, to be virtuous, to be kind. These may make us luminescent. They may grant us a kind of golden quality. But Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, one can understand me as I am, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And one is in full consciousness of, when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. That's a very beautiful teaching from the Bhagavad Gita, that's telling us really that it's, at the end of the day, it's not even the beauty and sort of golden glow of goodness that spiritual life is all about. Finally, it's about devotion. It's about heartfelt desire to serve, to not lust after things, no matter how good, noble, beautiful, even big statues of God that are so beautiful. It's not even about that effulgence. So similarly, when Uranus enters Taurus, a sign of Venus that is related to beauty and goodness and sweetness and kindness and tidiness and, you know, all of the good Venusian qualities, sensuality, order, balance, symmetry. These are Venusian properties. Uranus will tend to lust after them, like Prometheus or like Lucifer, where there's a desire to go toward the good because it's good. Like, why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you go towards love and light or whatever? But it's very easy for Uranus in a Venus ruled sign, just like it was very easy for me when Venus was squaring Uranus, just as Uranus entered Venus's sign, to get caught up in the desire, the lust, the bull rushing toward something that looks good or beautiful or true or noble or elevated. So the rush for the good and the pride associated with the good and the beautiful is a part of our lives, and sometimes more subtly than we are aware of. Every day we think, we craft, we plan, we imagine, what's the highest good that I can achieve? What's the most beautiful thing I can make? How can I be the best version of myself, right? But from the standpoint of Uranus and Taurus, the pride of the good can come before the fall of the good. The Promethean rush toward the golden bull of Taurus, no matter how progressive, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, green that it might be, will in time become the new tyranny. Just as the American Revolution and the French revolutions were soaked in blood and genocide. Democracy, so good, so beautiful, so true, so noble, so egalitarian, but also soaked in blood and genocide. Native American people here. Let's not forget that when Uranus was entering Taurus the last time, in the 30s, Hitler was coming into power. And Hitler was a triple Taurian with Sun, Venus, and Mars, if I remember correctly, in Taurus. And he was an art student. He was also born with Uranus in the other Venus-ruled sign of Libra. And he was a big fan of Hinduism, a big fan of the Bhagavad Gita, and someone who also aspired toward beauty and goodness and things like that. If you ever read about what his aspirations were prior to becoming the Hitler that we know, you wouldn't think of him necessarily as someone who would become a mass murderer, right? But of course, the image of the beautiful Aryan super race and the lunging toward that golden sense of utopia, this became the basis for fascism. And of course, again, when Uranus was entering Taurus, Hitler was rising to power. I don't want to talk about Hitler today. That's not the point. It's just a reminder for us that it's often the vision of what's true, what's beautiful, what's good that we think of, or the better society, the greener planet, like this. Or it can be the desire to have a better body, a cleaner home, be the best version of myself that I can be. But sometimes we are just like all of the people in the crowd rushing toward the golden light of the deities. We're stampeding like mad bulls toward something sattvic, something pure and good and simple and true, right? And we imagine that the good thing is so simple and so obvious that everyone should agree, and it should, you know what I mean? Like, well, right now, for example, it's very obvious to us that the planet is changing, climate change is happening. A lot of this is because of our own issues. So we think to ourselves, well, we should make a better planet. We should make a greener planet. This is obvious, right? And yet, it very quickly, what seems so obvious, so simple, so true, so good, one may become violent about. One may become violent toward others. And I'm not suggesting, I mean, this is kind of an extreme, but I'm just, whenever we start to think of, with Uranus and Taurus, whenever we start to think this is true, it's good, it's simple, it's self-evident, it's the best thing, and I should rush toward it with, complete abandon and this kind of revolutionary, avant-garde, defiant, progressive spirit. We have to be very, very careful of that because, the good becomes bad and the bad becomes good in cycles in this world. And we have to, I wrote this when I was writing my written version. I said, the good, the beautiful, and the golden may thus become the idols that we rush toward with disastrous results in the years to come, unless we can pause and find ourselves content to be mere beggars at the gates. Servants presenting ourselves before the source of all golden goodness, asking for the facility to serve rather than becoming selfish pilgrims, stampeding like mad bulls toward the sattvic but fleeting plains of goodness, richness, and beauty. We are not nearly careful enough about the vanity and violence of our good intentions. When the good becomes bad and the bad becomes good, when beggars become kings and kings become beggars, we sometimes remember these noble truths. Most often, though, history simply repeats itself, and we continue to be lived by the modes of material nature, which, as it turns out, are anything but natural for eternal spirit souls. So this is the thing we have to be careful about. I'm reminded of a quote from the Sri Ishopanishad, which I'm going to read to you now. This is the mantra 15 from the Sri Ishopanishad. It says, "O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence." I was thinking also when I was in Mayapur, for whatever reason, the memory came back to me of the film Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones movie that I remember really loving when I was a kid. And in that movie, the Nazis, who are always part of the plot in the Indiana Jones movies, they, and one of the reasons, by the way, that you find some weird sympathy between Hinduism and the Nazis is because when the British were in India, many people in India felt that, the British were their enemies. And so an enemy of our enemy is our friend, because the Nazis or the Germans were enemies of the British. There was a feeling as though that made them an ally of the Indian people who were dealing with the sort of imperial colonialism of the British. So you have some sympathy there between German and the people in Germany and people in India. In fact, Sanskrit becomes a lot of things about India transfer to Germany and become a big part of it. Even the swastika, the image of the swastika, comes from that part of the world. At any rate, in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's the sacred Ark of the Covenant, and it's golden, right? And of course, the Nazis want it. They're lusting after the power of this. What can we do with this? And in the very end, I'm not ruining the plot for you because you've probably seen it already. In the very end, of course, the Nazis open this to reveal the power, right? And their faces melt off. And Indiana Jones has to close his eyes and not look at the effulgence coming from this ark. He has to remain someone not who wants pride, power, honor, glory from this good, holy thing. He has to remain as someone who is a steward of it, who wants to preserve its dignity, who wants to be a steward of its legacy, right? He wants to help keep it safe and keep it out of the hands of people who would do selfish things with it. So this is, of course, a deep teaching for us about holy things. When we rush toward holy things, beautiful things that appear very good or virtuous, but there's an underlying selfish motive. Our faces melt off now. We stand to face a difficult karma. We become corrupted by our desire for the very thing that appears to be so good and noble and true. And so similarly, we have to be stewards, servants. We present ourselves before the deities, so to speak, with the desire to serve. And in terms of Uranus and Taurus, over the years to come, one thing that I would want to emphasize would be the importance of being very careful about the good things that we're drawn toward, right? The beautiful things that we're drawn toward, and the way that we want to revolutionize or make drastic changes in our life or aspire toward those things with a kind of defiant and possibly selfish ambitions. So we should be very careful of that in the years to come, 7 years now that we have to look forward to this. There are lots of other things that we could say about Uranus and Taurus. I'm not trying to suggest that the rise of fascism is back, or that, or that it's all going to be about, vanity and like, but this is a lesson for Uranus and Taurus that is sure to play out in our lives and in the collective, where the thing that appears so noble, good, and true, whether that's coming from liberals or conservatives, and whether that's coming from, spiritual people or, everyday secular people, the desire for the good, the beautiful, and the true, and rushing toward it with sort of selfish and reckless abandon can get us into serious trouble during this time. Okay, so remember that Uranus or Taurus is also a solid sign or a fixed sign. It's an earth sign, and it's somewhat conservative. So also the desire to preserve, conserve, hold on to what we think is good, true, or beautiful, and to do so with a kind of defiance, an intense selfishness. You can't take that away from me. This can't change. This shouldn't ever be different. So the resistance to change can take on a defiant quality with Uranus and Taurus. When something should change and it's time to change, but you hold on and defy that, you have to be careful about that as well. Now, in the story of Prometheus, Chiron ends up taking his place. And this is interesting because you have an immortal Chiron that's mortally wounded, which would mean he would have to suffer endlessly. And he takes the place of a mortal whose desire to be immortal was a transgression that led to a repetitive, sort of never-ending punishment. So this is very interesting because it's a Christ-like, Chiron is sort of a Christ-like figure in that regard. And you have the theme of, again, the healing of the desire to be eternal, the desire to be divine that Prometheus demonstrates. You have that desire is finally healed by a figure who is divine, who seeks release from his status as an immortal, who takes willingly to die, even though he is immortal. That's Chiron. And so there's some alchemical process that is happening as Chiron enters Aries, where Uranus has just been, and which is such an intensely combative place for Uranus over the past 7 or 8 years. And the desire to make change, to force change, very combative and forceful and aggressive. With Chiron now entering that place, and Uranus, Prometheus entering Venus's sign of Taurus, the potential to heal something of our lust and desire for progress and change that has created an agitation of the spirit. When we know things might need to change, or we know that things could be better, but when we become so deeply agitated by the status quo, by the way that things are, we become so deeply unnerved by the way that things are, that we can become filled with anger and intensity and resentment and vitriol. We can be on edge. We can think of other people who are our enemies. Are you for what I want to do? Are you for where I think we need to go? Are you for the good, or are you against me? This is Uranus and Aries kind of thinking. Now with Uranus in Taurus and Chiron in Aries, the potential for healing the wounds of our most violent ambitions are possible. So that is something that I'm looking forward to with Chiron, the one who takes Prometheus's place, moving into the sign that Uranus was just in. So we have to be aware of these lessons. But again, I did 3 videos on Uranus and Taurus last spring, so you should check those out because there's a lot of other information that might be useful for you. Finally, there's something else that I wanted to bring up, which was I did an I Ching reading, and the I Ching reading for Uranus into Taurus that I included this morning had some interesting things to say as well. I'm going to give you a very brief version of it. The first hexagram was number 13, which is called social mechanism. It has a lot to do with groups and cliques and clans and things like that. And allies. Venus is, of course, the planet, Uranus being in Venus's home sign of Taurus. Venus is the planet that has to do with friends and allies. And so the first hexagram shows the image of friends and allies and groups. Interestingly, the changing line, number 4, is a line within the hexagram that talks about the kinds of quarrels that save us from a war. So, for example, sometimes you're imagining some big, offensive, like some big military operation you're going to perform in your life. You're going to go at something. And we concoct these things. And we perceive, again, that certain people or things are against us or whatever. And this line in particular says something like, you get, as you're sort of preparing to go and do something big and maybe kind of aggressive, you get into a smaller quarrel and you get a taste for just how difficult it's going to be if you submit, if you get into this bigger conflict that you're imagining. And this would have to do with conflicting groups or people or friends or relationships or cliques. And you get a taste for the quarrel and you go, no, not worth it. This is actually, it's not going to be a good thing. And this line in particular says that it's good fortune to realize such a thing, to have a smaller version of a conflict than for it to escalate into the full-scale war. Because a small taste for the conflict can make you realize it's not worth it. This hexagram changed then into number 37, which is family duties. very important that we think about the potential for groups, friendships, and allegiances with Uranus and Taurus to change, for there to be some revolution in our relationships or friendships, social circles. But there's a warning here in the hexagram about remembering the need to stay, to keep bonds like a family, to keep closeness with, in harmony with people we love, and to be careful about trying to pit people or groups against one another, to get into clique wars or rivalries between groups, which could be a temptation of this transit as well. So Venus in Taurus often is about, from a social perspective, the Venusian Taurus is sometimes about the need to feel grounded, anchored, secured in your social self-worth. Am I beautiful? Do I belong? Do I have money? I mean, these are common sort of Western values, but am I with my people, and getting a sense of security from those things. So Uranus and Taurus can challenge that security, can also create factions and factional rivalries and sort of wars. This is an instruction here that says, you get a small taste for some of these conflicts, you'll realize that the most radical thing you could do is find innovative ways of maintaining harmony or creating deeper levels of harmony or even new relationships or allegiances. So thinking about that rather than thinking about getting into jealousy, envy, and rivalry, which can be a big part of any Venus-ruled sign, Libra as well, or any Venus theme in astrology. So Liz Green liked to say, some people think of Venus, oh, she's so nice, there's no tooth and nail in Venus. You know what I mean? It's like, not so. The goddess is moved into conflict, oftentimes through envy and through jealousy and rivalry. To compare, in order for something to be beautiful, it's usually beautiful because it stands out as being compared to other things. So the potential for envy and rivalry and jealousy to become a part of the Venus and Taurus moment that we're in, or the Uranus and Taurus moment. So that's what I've got. As usual, I hope that this was interesting. And if you have comments or want to ask any questions, feel free to drop them in the YouTube feed or send me an email at nightlightastrology@gmail.com. Happy Uranus into Taurus. I know this one was heavy on the moral lessons, but if you want to learn more about Uranus and Taurus, again, I have 3 videos in my archives that go through a lot of different dimensions of this transit, which lasts about 7 years. So, okay, everyone, take care. Bye.